Welcome to the Perry's Prayer Warriors channel. This week, Steve takes us through Ezekiel chapters 41 and 42. Join us as he describes the Millennium Temple. Please like and subscribe.
Okay, here we go. Are you ready? It's going to be a lesson today. I remember watching Mike Huckabee on television talking about the time that he took his entire family to Israel. And when the kids got back and they explained the trip, they called it the "We Ran Where Jesus Walked" trip. And this is kind of going to be our lesson on the first part of today. We're going to run where Ezekiel walked because I want to get to a video today that I think will help you visualize what we're talking about here, because these last several chapters of Ezekiel are all about measurements and this future temple and all kinds of things that may be a little hard to wrap your brain around without some kind of visual. And so I thought it'd be good. I found a great video on YouTube that I thought would be really good to kind of give you an idea visually of what that's all about. So what we're going to do first, though, is we're going to start with a quick walkthrough of the scriptures themselves to honor our verse-by-verse approach. So we're in chapters 41 and 42 today. I'm going to build for you in the presentation a schematic of the measurements that we're talking about today, okay? So this is the outer boundary that we're talking about. And then we're going to get into understanding the measurements. Matter of fact, just think of the outer boundary and keep that in the back of your mind. It's going to be very well explained in the video, but let's get to the next slide where we really look at these conversions and what they mean. So this gives you a much better idea of what we're talking about when we say a cubit, what's a long cubit, what's a reed. So some different ways to look at measuring things here that gives you a sense of, okay, the cubit we're talking about here is somewhere in the 18 to 21 inches. The long cubit is 1 cubit plus 1 hand's breadth. That sounds so familiar for some reason. I think I heard that like last week or something like that. So Kevin, thank you for that. And so the long cubit is really a little over 20 inches. Why is all this important? Because when we get to looking at the way that this is designed, and I've really kind of fallen in love with that YouTube channel that I'll show you that video later, because it really gives a great explanation of the perfection of God's designs. And I've seen another one on Noah's Ark that was actually tested by a bunch of scientists in Korea in the last couple of decades, and they said it was perfect. It is the only shape that could have survived. And it's just amazing, God's designs. That's why these measurements are so important and why we want to kind of pay attention to them. Modern day tankers, the huge super tankers that move oil around, it has taken scientists and engineers 25 years to figure it out. Guess what? The dimensions and the ratios are exactly the same as the ark. So kind of gives you an idea of how God's designs are absolute perfection. So let's talk a little bit about the inner temple, just to get a sense of what it would look like. Ezekiel, in this chapter 41, he's led into a vision where he's looking at the profound depths of a future temple. How do we know it's a future temple? You're going to find that out as we go through today. Because literally, as Kevin so appropriately said last time, there is no place on earth right now where this temple would fit. There's no place it would fit, especially in the Holy Land. So this is why it's a future temple. And we're going to explain how it's going to fit when that time comes. So under the guidance of a celestial messenger, every dimension and intricate detail is meticulously measured, revealing the blueprint of God's dwelling place. So let's go ahead and start. We're going to go ahead and read some scripture here. Somebody read 41, 1-4.
Then he brought me to the sanctuary, and he measured the side pillars. 6 cubits wide on each side was the width of the side pillar. The width of the entrance was 10 cubits, and the sides of the entrance were 5 cubits on each side. He also measured the length of the sanctuary, 40 cubits, and the width, 20 cubits. Then he went inside and measured each side pillar of the doorway, 2 cubits, and the doorway, 6 cubits high, and the width of the doorway, 7 cubits. And he measured its length, 20 cubits, and the width, 20 cubits, before the sanctuary. And he said to me, "This is the most holy place."
So what we're starting to see, and this is so important, because let me ask you this question. Do you believe that God has a specific design for your life? Okay, then you should be reading into this God's precision. And we should read that into God's precision for the design of our purpose and our life. This is far more than talking about a future temple. Okay, it is talking about, where does God's Spirit reside right now? In our body, which is his temple at this point, right? We treat our bodies as a temple that the Holy Spirit dwells in. So there's a lot of connection here as we go through this. So now we're looking at the nave and the most holy place. The innermost rooms take shape as we talk about this. The nave itself is 40 by 20 cubits, and the most holy place is a perfect square, 20 by 20 cubits at the heart of the temple. Now, somebody read 41, 5-12.
Then he measured the wall of the temple, 6 cubits, and the width of the side chambers, 4 cubits, all around the house on every side. The side chambers were in 3 stories, one above another, and 30 in each story, and the side chambers extended to the wall which stood on their inward side all around, so that they could be attached, but not be attached to the wall of the temple itself. And the side chambers surrounding the temple were wider at each successive story. Because the structure surrounding the temple went upward by stages on all sides of the temple, for that reason the width of the temple increased as it went higher, and so one went up from the lowest story to the highest by way of the second story. I saw also that the house had a raised platform all around. The foundations of the side chambers were a full rod of 6 long cubits in height. The thickness of the outer wall of the side chambers was 5 cubits. But the free space between the side chambers belonging to the temple and the outer chambers was 20 cubits in width around the temple on every side. The doorways of the side chambers toward the free space consisted of one doorway toward the north and another doorway toward the south, and the width of the free space was 5 cubits all around. The building that was in front of the separate area at the side toward the west was 70 cubits wide, and the wall of the building was 5 cubits thick all around, and its length was 90 cubits.
What's the most interesting thing that you pull out of what we just read?
Just getting wider.
It got wider as it got taller.
Yeah.
That doesn't make sense, right? But that's God's design, okay? And how he puts things together. God has a tendency to turn things upside down. So that's kind of cool. So let's look at what we're talking about. Now, don't miss this. There are 30 chambers per story, stacked 3 stories high, surrounded the temple on every side, every level wider than the last, rising in sacred symmetry. So think about that as we continue to look at the temple here. So this gives you a better idea, if you're bird's eye view looking in, gives you a better idea of what we're looking at here. What's at the very center? The most holy place. Makes sense, doesn't it? 30 chambers per story, 3 stories high, wrap around the temple on every side, each level wider than the last. Let's talk about verses 13 to 17. Somebody read that.
Then he measured the temple 100 cubits long. The separate area with the building and its walls were also 100 cubits long. Also the width of the front of the temple and that of the separate areas along the east side totaled 100 cubits. And he measured the length of the building along the front of the separate area behind it, with a gallery on each side, 100 cubits. He also measured the inner sanctuary and the porches of the courtyard. The thresholds, the latticed windows, and the galleries all around their 3 stories, opposite the threshold, were paneled with wood all around, and from the ground to the windows, but the windows were covered, over the entrance and to the inner house and on the outside and on all the wall all around inside and outside by measurement.
What is the main number that we can pull out of these verses? 100, right? And that's going to play later as we look at the build out of the temple and as we look at the video here in a minute. So now we started right in the center and we're building out and we're building up. Okay. So now we can now see a broader schematic of what's going on with the build of this future temple. Every major dimension resolves to 100 cubits, right? 100 by 100 by 100 by 100. The inner temple is now fully defined, which is a perfect expression of divine order. Do you think God is a God of order? Yeah. And that is the beauty of his design. So let's go on. I told you this is the We Run Where Ezekiel Walked tour. So here we go. Somebody read 18 to 20.
It was carved with cherubim and palm trees, and a palm tree was between cherub, and every cherub had 2 faces, a human face toward the palm tree on one side and a young lion's face toward the palm tree on the other side. They were carved on all the house all around. From the ground to above the entrance, cherubim and palm trees were carved, as well as on the wall of the sanctuary.
If you're walking between places in that land, in that area, and you happen to see a palm tree off to the side, probably an oasis, we're talking about life. We're talking about the water of life that comes from Jesus Christ. That's why the palm trees are represented here. Somebody read 21 to 26.
The doorposts of the sanctuary were square. As for the front of the inner sanctuary, the appearance of one doorpost was like that of the other. The altar was of wood, 3 cubits high, and its length 2 cubits. Its corners, its base, and its sides were of wood. And he said to me, "This is the table that is before the Lord." The sanctuary and the inner sanctuary each had a double door. Each of the doors had 2 leaves, 2 swinging leaves, 2 leaves for one door, and 2 leaves for the other. Also there were carved on them, on the doors of the main room, cherubim and palm trees like those carved on the walls, and there was a threshold of wood on the front of the porch outside. And there were latticed windows and palm trees on one side and on the other, on the sides of the porch. The same were on the side chambers of the house and the thresholds.
What was in the previous temple that we don't hear about in this one?
The ark.
The Ark of the Covenant. And there's a reason for that. Okay, let's move on. So now we're getting to chapter 42, which is the outer court, which is the priestly chambers and the sacred boundaries. So somebody read 1 through 12.
Then he brought me out into the outer courtyard, the way toward the north, and he brought me to the chamber which was opposite the separate area and opposite the building toward the north. Along the length, which was 100 cubits, was the north door. The width was 50 cubits. Opposite the 20 cubits which belonged to the inner courtyard, and opposite the stone pavement which belonged to the outer courtyard, was gallery corresponding to gallery in 3 stories. In front of the chambers was an inner passage 10 cubits wide, a way of 100 cubits, and their openings were on the north. Now the upper chambers were smaller because the galleries took more space away from them than from the lower and middle ones in the building. For they were in 3 stories and had no pillars like the pillars of the courtyards. For that reason the upper chambers were set back from the ground upward, more than the lower and middle ones. As for the outer wall by the side of the chambers, toward the outer courtyard facing the chambers, its length was 50 cubits. For the length of the chambers which were in the outer courtyard was 50 cubits, and behold, the length of those facing the main room was 100 cubits. And below these chambers was the entrance on the east side, as one enters them from the outer courtyard. In the thickness of the wall of the courtyard toward the east, facing the separate area, and facing the building, there were chambers. And the way in front of them was like the appearance of the chambers which were on the north, according to their length, so was their width, and all their exits were according to their building plans and openings. Corresponding to the openings of the chambers which were toward the south was an opening at the head of the way in front of the wall toward the east, as one enters them.
Okay, so what are we seeing in this? Well, at a high level, what are we seeing in this? What does the north chamber mirror? The south chamber, right? You're seeing symmetry throughout this entire design, and there is what we don't know is the depth of the reasons for those symmetries, okay? This is not something haphazardly put together. This is specifically designed, but why do you design this temple? This temple is not something God needs, but there must be much more purpose behind the design of this temple for the people who will come to this temple, right? So we have to start to think, what is this all about? What is God doing here? Because that temple is not something that he needs. He's designing it for his people and for worship and for coming to see him. And you're going to start to understand the dimensions that we're talking about here in a few minutes. So now we're going to talk a little bit about the priestly chambers. The outer court is taking shape. The north and south for the priests are added. Each is 100 cubits long, 50 cubits wide, flanking the inner temple. That gives you kind of an idea. It's almost like there's a progression as you come in the gates to the temple. There's a progression into that most holy place, and everything becomes a little more sacred and a little more holy, if that's possible, through that process until you get to that central hub, which is the most holy place. Somebody read for me 13 and 14.
Then he said to me, "The north chambers and the south chambers, which are opposite the separate area, they are the holy chambers where the priests who are near to the Lord shall eat the most holy things. There they shall set the most holy things, the grain offering, the sin offering, and the guilt offering, for the place is holy. When the priests enter, they shall not go out into the outer courtyard from the sanctuary without laying their garments there in which they minister, for they are holy. They shall put on other garments, then they shall approach that which is for the people."
Interesting, right? Okay, let's keep moving. The outer wall. Somebody read 15 to 20 for us.
Now when he had finished measuring the inner house, he brought me out by way of the gate which faced east, and measured it all around. He measured on the east side with the measuring rod, 500 rods by the measuring rod. He measured on the north side, 500 rods by the measuring rod. On the south side, he measured 500 rods with the measuring rod. He turned to the west side and measured 500 rods with the measuring rod. He measured it on the 4 sides. It had a wall all around, the length 500 rods and the width 500, to divide between the holy and the common.
The measures here are 500, but they're actually reeds. okay, which is different than a cubit. So we'll talk about the differences here and what all that means. The temple schematic, let's look at it. Let's look at the complete. That is the complete schematic of the temple, but that is not the outer walls. We're talking a much, much larger place. So let's get to what's really important here. What's the vision's purpose? Number one is divine precision. And if God is this careful and interested in getting this structure exactly right, how much more does he care for you in your life? What did Jesus always put first? Churches and cathedrals?
No.
No. The Father, and second, other people, right? And he said it very clearly, which are the two most important commandments when he was asked that question. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and spirit, and love your neighbor as yourself. Okay? It was all about people. If God is this careful about putting a structure together, he's more interested in the people, and this structure is for people. You'll notice the sacred separation as we talk about the priests and what kind of clothes they wear in what places and all of that. And this is a future hope. Now, remember, where was Ezekiel having this vision? In exile in Babylon. This was a future hope for the people, and it's a future hope for us as well. All right, let me just close with this. I wanted to show that video so that this isn't just abstract, right? God's ways are not our ways. They are so much higher. But at the heart of it, you saw there at the very end of the video, is his heart to live inside of ours. And I think that's what's most important here. Kevin.
That was